And I do believe we are live.
What are you saying?
It does appear as if we are live, and although I can see the mute button on your camera right now because I'm a pro at this.
Wait,
it's fine. It's fine. We'll just.
You're saying we're live, but you can't hear me. Is that how this is going to go this time?
No, I had I left the Discord mute thing up over the bottom right of your camera, but it's
right
anyway. Hello, everybody.
Right in the middle, maybe it look better.
I'll draw a little smiley face.
Yeah, little mute button.
While I'm at it, I might as well. I'm gonna go ahead and do the tweet and the Facebooking and all that.
Do
stuff.
the tweeters. You gotta play the game. Do the tweeters. Do the Facebooks.
Tweeters.
Book faces.
Boom. Social media is up. Both the Book of Faces and the tweeter.
How you doing, Happa?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Cheers to you, buddy.
Cheers to you. You just having some Gentleman Jack straight up, or you know?
No, that's an Alabama gentleman. So it's
like
Buffalo
that,
Rock and some Gentleman Jack. I do like that.
I still have 3 cans of that in the.
Do you?
In the fridge, yeah.
I have to bring you some this summer. Or spring. Bring you a case of it.
I can't believe we're already rolling into the spring.
I know. It's been in some ways it's been a really long, an arduous winter and fall, and in some ways it's been incredibly fast. I think back to us sweating on the USS Kidd, and me wondering if my shoes were going to melt. Because the deck was so hot, and I was talking to my daughter, and I was like, "Are our shoes going to melt?" Right? So Baton Rouge was hot, and the Mississippi was full.
Oh man, and it was very muggy that day.
Yeah, it was, and all the tourists who were on the riverboat, trying to see the museum from from Europe.
What was interesting about that day too when we went on the Kidd, and we're obviously sidebarring a bit here, but it was hot. I mean, it was obviously very hot. But it was hot, yes. But I wasn't really. It wasn't bugging me so much. I think I don't know if it's just because we were on the river or what the deal was, but it seemed like it was okay.
That's where our picture came from. We've been sweating for at least 2 hours in that picture.
Let's say I'm glistening in that picture. Every time I look at that picture, I'm like,
yeah, we put in a day.
Yeah.
It was fun, though.
Sure.
It was a good thing.
Yeah, it was a good day.
So episode 4.
Episode 4. Technically
we
5.
did it in less than 6 months, so, it's a start.
I'm pretty proud of us, I think.
Yeah. I mean, we delayed for like a week.
I mean, the goal eventually is 2 a month, right?
Yeah,
that would be the goal. Interestingly enough, this was exactly a month from the last one. The 4th of February was when we did it.
Okay. Well, hey, you know what? That's an increased frequency. It's not the ideal, but it's increased. We're getting there.
Hey, man, that's good enough for me.
I mean, we're getting there, right? Like we're gonna get there, and we very much enjoy doing these. You want to tell anybody? Why don't you tell everyone who's checking us out what this is? What are we doing, and who are you?
So, Seven and I are just a couple of old folks that are. Well, I guess we can't. I shouldn't say old folks yet, right? We got a few years before.
I mean, you're old. I'm 26.
Wow. I'm 28. All right. No. Both he and I connected playing video games, and at the time. I was in a professional capacity in the video game industry, and he was streaming the game, and we just had personalities. I would say pretty much from day one we kind of just melded personality wise from day ones and became friends. And throughout it's been 2 years I think now.
It has been 2 years. Yep.
We just kind of talked about doing a podcast here and there. Because we always had really good conversations in general. About, I think we've been all over the spectrum in terms of what we've talked about, and so that's what this came from. And this podcast isn't specifically about gaming. I'm sure we'll talk about gaming and stuff like that at some point, but more real world stuff, our thoughts, things we see. Like we've talked about social media and advertising in the past. We talked about the Twitter acquisition, and it's an ongoing conversation. I guess I should actually say.
Yeah, the Twitter one is funny because this is the first time we don't have it on a subject list, but I'm sure it'll come out.
And actually, I meant to ask you if we wanted to talk about it more because the conversation about the glitchiness of the app right now is probably a good one to talk about.
Probably is. Yeah, probably is. I think we will
But,
talk about it. There is a subject on our list which is going to include
Sure.
some things there. But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that pretty well covers it.
Sure.
I don't guess we have to do personal introductions. Anyone who is listening should have listened enough to know who we are by now.
Totally. And if you haven't, go back and do it.
Yeah, you need to go back and check it out. It's there's some good stuff in there. We're still finding our stride about how we talk about things, how we move subject to subject, how we have routine subjects we want to cover, what kind of things we want to cover. We're still figuring all that out. But there is some really interesting stuff, I think, when I go back and check out, because I have to edit these, right? So I go back and I edit the audio and everything. When you go back and listen, there's some really good stuff in there. And, especially when you go through and track through kind of the current events conversations, right? Like the things we were talking about. And Twitter's a really fascinating example because it changed so much. And, we've been doing this for, 8-9 months, whatever it is. And, the Twitter subject's been on every one of them, which is 5 episodes now. And it's been a very different conversation every time. So it's really interesting to go back and listen to those, and you should check them out. You can get it on Spotify. Wherever you get your podcast, you can get it. Of course, you can come here to YouTube, which is where we do live recording. If you're not watching today, go to YouTube. It's Real Talk, REELTALK with Happa 7. So you go check that on YouTube. Love to have people chatting. We've got someone chatting right now, Son MG, one of our really good friends. In fact, someone that I would credit for being a central part of just the community that we've created and that we're part of. Very, very Uncle Son in some ways. So Son's chatting, and I would love to have people chat, with us on YouTube, but also check us out Spotify, right? Wherever else you get your podcasts. And if there's a place we're not showing up, let us know, right? We'll let Happa know. Letting me know does no good. But tell Happa, and we'll make sure that we get into that place as well. Goal is really to have fun, have some conversations, maybe spark some people to think about things a little bit differently than they thought about them before. But not to be too serious. We really don't want to get too deep, dark, and serious like some podcasts do.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that Seven and I talked about a while ago. That we're going to lay some ground rules, right? No politics, no religion, nothing super serious. But I really, really, really also would love to encourage the folks that listen. If you're listening, to message us on social media or whatever, or come here to the YouTube channel and in the comments leave ideas for topics or questions you might have about something we talked about or whatever. I read every single one of those as they come in, and I'll either annotate those down in our notes online, and Seven and I will talk about it, or who knows, it may be a subject that we talk about in the future. So definitely do that for sure. But yeah, we try to keep things, I think we keep things pretty lighthearted. We don't try to get too serious, I think.
We'll tackle subjects that aren't easy necessarily to tackle, right? But we don't shy away from things to talk about, and certainly you and I don't agree on everything. But it's all done from a spirit of hey, let's hang out, have a good conversation, have a drink together. If we lived in the same town, we just go to a bar and have a drink together, right? And
totally.
We don't, right? So this is a way for us to do that. So well, by way of kicking us off, Happa, we've got a subject list here.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, we do work on a subject list ahead of time. As Happa was saying, if you got subjects you'd like for us to cover, please let us know. And this one is actually one that was kind of left over from last time that we didn't really cover in earnest. We kind of danced around it, and so I didn't bring it up. I didn't push it in last time, but it was one that we wanted to talk about, and I felt was really good for us to get into. Probably a little bit of heavy subject matter could be in here, and I'm really curious to see where the conversation goes. But it's the economy, right? The current economy and how corporations are handling their place in the economy. So, as a refresher for what we were talking about when we put the subject on the list, you see lots and lots of layoffs. You see lots and lots of, at the same time, immense amounts of quarterly profits being, record-setting profits amid layoffs in the same company. So it's pretty fascinating to see where we are right now. So where's your head on that, Happa? Why don't you kick us off?
Well, first off, it still blows my mind away that being in the military as long as I did, I didn't have to worry about work. I didn't have to worry about getting paid or whatever the case may be. To the extent I think a lot of people out in the real world, as I call it, really do have to. And so it kind of hurts me in my heart when I read, X company laid off however much, or Twitter blind laid off 50 people, or whatever. When I read that stuff, because I mean that's people's livelihoods, like that's real life. But I like that you mentioned the fact that a lot of these companies are posting record profits. So I guess for me, not necessarily being in corporate America and seeing if you're making record profits, why the preparation has to be to lay people off, or if that's a preparatory thing you do to try to maintain those profits, or it's just a reflex that we have gotten into the corporate mindset now, that when the the economy gets a little tight, I just have to lay people off. I don't know what that is, but I know for me at least, it's rather worrisome to sit there and see that stuff happening, because I'm lucky I don't have to necessarily worry about a lot of that stuff, but I don't know, man. It's scary to me to watch that stuff going on.
It really is, and it's pretty fascinating. So to draw a distinction between us, I've been an executive in the technology space for a lot of years, and been in the middle of a lot of weird conversations around things like that. And it's interesting because you've got companies who are laying people off and they're posting record profits, and you've got companies like, say, Target, as an example, who are posting losses, and they just posted a fourth quarter of losses, sequentially, and that's not a thing that happens at Target. But they're not laying people off,
right?
And so you really are starting to see distinctions between companies who are just willing to sell people out for profits, willing to sell employees out for profits, and others who maybe are a little bit more future facing and say, hey, you know what, we'll get back on the profit train, but we believe in our people and we want to keep them around. Right. And one of the things, you mentioned people having to wonder if they were going to get a paycheck. That's a real thing. Maybe people aren't always prepared for that, especially people who are coming out. I'll hire someone, they'll come in their first job, right? And they're like, oh my God, I'm getting into the tech industry, and I'm so excited, right? And oh my God, it's my first job. And the reality hits. At some point, I've been laid off multiple times. Like, it hits at some point, and it's devastating. And I've seen people actually leave industries as a result of that. And one of the things that kind of gets me, and maybe makes me feel kind of the worst about it, is people who say they should have been laid off. Right? People outside the company who are like, "Oh, good. I'm glad they were making too much money anyway." Right? Like that's as if that's somehow representative of the person who got laid off. Like, they asked for money. A company thought it was worth it. They got the money, and then all of a sudden they don't have a job anymore. But just like anybody else, unless you're at a really top echelon of let me say it this way: if you live off of a salary, you're spending it.
Oh yeah.
There are people who don't, right? Those aren't people living off their salaries. They're living off of whatever capital investments they may have made. What they got these investments, they're living off other things. But if you live off of your salary, you're probably spending it. That includes people who are making more money than you would think you could spend, and that's people often, we have a consumeristic society, and people often spend to the level of earning. May not be smart, but it's true. And so it really is hard to see people gloating on oh, I'm glad they got let go. I'm glad that's really good, because on the other side of it, who are you really? Are you saying you want the owner of that company just to get more and more money? Do you I envision a dragon on its hoard. I envision a dragon, Smog, and if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, right, sitting in a mountain on the horde, and just accruing more and more of that, while getting rid of the peasants who are actually the ones responsible for generating the wealth. And while I find that picture distasteful, I find it more distasteful when people come out of the woodworks and say, hell yeah, I like the dragon, right? So it's a really bizarre thing to see how it's going. And I'm interested to see companies like Target, and I bring up Target, as a good example of, I know it's a company that's very, very, very forward-facing. They have a very, very futuristic outlook. They generally look at, 15 to 20 years in their investment. So they have a really good future-facing, outlook on income, and they're a brand that people admire. So I'm really curious to see how their investment pays off. We didn't lay people off. We want to keep them around. We believe in our people. And then I'm also curious to see on the other side of the coin, there's an awful lot of companies that people respected until now.
Right.
You've got Alphabet, which owns Google, right? All the tech companies. In fact, Warren Buffett was talking about the tech companies. He's like, these were our, up and coming blue chips. These were the companies you could just bet on every quarter.
Yeah.
And these were the companies people were hedging with. So in other words, you might bet something in automotive. From an investment standpoint, you may put something in some form of commodities. You may do some futures, like you may do some of that, but you would go back and be like, yeah, but I'm going to put some money in Apple, right? Because that's a sure thing. Now, Apple, by the way, have you seen what happened at Apple?
I don't think I have.
Tim Cook decided not to lay people off instead of he lowered his salary, or he lowered his pay. I'd work for that now, right? Like,
do you think that was a conscious decision, or did he actually do that with the idea, well, it's going to grow more buy-in from my employees or people that might want to work and synergize with this company to stay?
I think it's
because it's not like he needed the money, right?
He doesn't need the money, right? Correct. Yeah. He doesn't need the money. He'll never need the money. So here's what I will guess. I've met Tim Cook. He comes across as a very nice and genuine human being. And I will tell you that in one meeting, right, handshake, 3 minutes of conversation, I can't read a person. But here's what I can promise you I can pick up in that moment, and everything since then, he's brilliant. Right? There's just no denying he's brilliant. So I would bet, if I were just guessing, that the level of talent, the level of human being that Apple has both hired and been able to keep, right? So they develop their people, and these people are brilliant human beings. I would bet he's looking at that and saying, I don't think if things turn around in 6 months and everything's great that we can replace them. If I lose them, I'm losing them to Samsung. I'm losing them to someone else. And I don't think in a reasonable amount of time I can get them back. So I'm willing to do what I need to do to make sure that I retain the best possible talent. And right now, that is this move. While other companies are saying, and Elon Musk being, here we go, Twitter, right? Elon Musk being probably the best example of, I just don't care.
Yeah, I'm literally just slashing positions, period.
Just don't care. Like, right? He brought in his cousin to run the damn place, right? Like, like, he doesn't care. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's out on an island, doesn't care. Looking at top line and bottom line and laying off engineers and letting people go. You know, the woman who slept under the desk and was doing the,
oh god,
she got let go, right? Like, so this is, I don't know if you saw that. Like, she was the one that was like hard, going hard in the paint. On you should sleep at the office, right? He laid her off last week or 2 weeks ago. So like, you've got the companies that are all the way over here on this kind of train of just, I don't care. And then you got companies, I think Target, I think Apple, I respect those brands. And you look at them and you're like, you know what? We're going to do what we can to keep our people. We can still do layoffs later, right? It's not off the table. Like, if it's a thing we have to do, we have to do it. But they're saying there are other levers we can pull. So when you're in the boardroom and you're like, what can we do to make sure our books look good for the next year? And there were like a dozen things you could do, or maybe 4 things, or even 3 things, right? But you've got some number of levers that you could pull. And some companies were just like, you know what? Layoffs, boom. They can never pull it again. That's the problem. You can't pull that again in 6 months. You've already pulled it. That's it. So now, Tim Cook was like, you know what? I'll pull the one on my pay. We'll cut some costs, right? We'll do some of that other, and I can pull that other one later if I need to. But if you pull that layoff lever, you have pulled it. There's no one ringing that bell. And, I want to ask your opinion on this. As someone, so I'm a little bit insider on some of these, right? Because this is the world I kind of live in. So I kind of ask your opinion as someone who's not necessarily that. One of the things I've observed is how many companies are doing this. And you and I talked very briefly about this last time, but I'm wondering if companies if you're the only company that does layoffs, let's say everything's going great and the economy's going great, and let's say you're at Apple and you do a layoff. The news headlines are just going to be, they're going to butcher you. And they're going to go for 3 months, right? People are going to be talking about it on CNBC, like, it's going on about it because you laid people off, but you're the only company that did it.
Right.
So I'm curious now if some of these companies aren't just trying to be a face in the crowd. They're like, if we're going to lay people off, now's a good time because the news cycle for us will be negative for 24 hours instead of 24 days. So are you even keeping up? Like, is it just a bunch of companies are laying people off, or do you have specifics in your head? Are you remembering that?
I truly believe that, like what you just said, like we're just going to be a hiccup in the giant room full of hiccups. Like no one's going to notice. But because you've got a lot of things going on right now, right? So I love that you brought up Target because Target was announcing record losses, right?
Yeah,
but where were their losses actually? Where was huge portions of their losses coming from?
Yeah.
Do you know where that?
Yeah, logistics and honestly, they've done a bad job in the buying world.
Yeah.
They can't get rid of some product.
Yep.
They have an inventory issue basically.
Right, and then you add in. I mean, it's only a subsect of that, but you add in also up and down throughout the United States, shoplifting and theft has just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of product that they just lose, and insurance companies aren't covering anymore because it's not against the law, quote unquote, in a lot of these places. Not to get political or whatever, but that if you have a business model where I have product A, I need to sell it for X amount of dollars, and that product just constantly leaves the shelves without profit,
it's going out the back door instead of the front door.
Right, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
Whereas, so you've got that going on right now. You've got all of these social media outlets losing their just piles of money in terms of ad revenue, because I don't think it's just because of the economy. I think it's because also right now everyone is kind of paying attention to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. They sell my information, so I'm a little bit more careful about what I do on social media. There's been a lot of hearings on Capitol Hill and blah blah blah. These things are coming out, so people are becoming a little bit more aware, so perhaps they're using social media less. Right, and then you have the other side of it where there's a lot of push-pull in the electronics realm about what product's better, or what product allows what. Apple allowing TikTok or not allowing TikTok, and all these things are compounded right now. Plus the economic position we're in, right? So
yeah.
And I would almost argue that some of these companies didn't need to do the layoffs. I really don't think that a lot of them needed to do this. But I think, like you said, somewhere in a boardroom somewhere, they said, hey, everybody's doing it. Just sneak it under the radar. And everyone, it may get reported in the news, but it's going to be part of that 2-minute blurb where they talk about all this stuff, and no one's going to really notice. And we'll just carry on,
Yeah, I mean, technology companies have been interesting over the past however long, right? And I've been in jobs where someone comes in and they're like, you need to hire this many people. I don't need that many people. You're going to hire this many people. Why would I need that? I really don't need that many people.
Yeah.
Right? You're just creating a situation where I'm going to have so many people that you're going to come back to me at some point and you're going to be like, why does your personnel cost so much? And I'm going to be like, well, you made me hire,
Yeah.
50% more people than I actually wanted. And I'm talking about in just instances of people coming in and saying, you're going to hire 50 people right in a quarter right now. And I'm like, I asked for 5. No, you're going to hire 50. So I've had that occur. And what I've witnessed over a period of time, especially technology companies that are working off of VC, right? So,
sure.
So you do your Series A, your Series B, and you start getting more and more and more and more investment capital. One of the chosen markers of success, right, is how many employees you have. Right. And so I've actually gone through processes where I work with states, different governments, and I talk about job incentives packages and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
And the marker is how many people you employ. And what's interesting is there is a very responsible way to do that. And then there's a way where you're full of it. And so a responsible company, let's say if Hapa and 7 started, Hapa and 7 LLC, and we were talking to the great state of, Texarkana, right? Whatever it is, and they're like, hey, how many people are you going to hire in the next 3 years? So that we're talking about this jobs incentive package.
Sure.
We would be like, well, we think this number is how many we're going to need to be successful. Right?
Sure.
That's the way I know you well enough to say we would probably walk in with that attitude. There's an awful lot of people that walk in and say 500.
Yeah. Just off the top of their head.
Right, because it's a crazy number, and they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
500? I had no idea.
Yeah.
You must be amazing. Right? And then you're stuck hiring 500 people. Well, you do that, and then at some point you got 500 people.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many technical companies do that. I've seen so many come in and say, I'm going to hire 500 people. Well, here's what it did over a period of time, and this is getting really philosophical for me, but over a period of time, when you say, I'm going to hire 500 people, and enough companies do that, right? So let's say we have the top 100 companies that go out and say, we're going to hire 500 people. The market conditions you create is incredible scarcity.
Sure.
So in order to hire those 500 people, in order to get those incentives, you're willing to spend just about anything.
Yeah.
And you end up paying, people who just got a 4-year degree, right, at tier 7 school, right? They come out and they're like $375,000 a year.
Yeah.
Plus equity.
Yeah.
Plus bonus, right? And these companies were like, okay, we got to get that. We got to hit that number. Got to hit that 500 number. And so then they look around sometime later and they're like, you guys realize how much our employees are costing right now?
Yeah.
Right? Like our app is making $25 million a year. That sounds great. Okay, our employees are costing $3.7 billion a year. Right? Like, and you see it happening. Right? You look at like Instacart reporting. I think it was like a $425 million loss. What?
Yeah.
How do you lose that much money? Right?
Yeah.
So, those things, like, to me, when you're talking about like walking in the room, I think there are companies right now that are handling the economy. The economy is heading in a way that none of us are happy with.
Yeah.
And I think, the pandemic, there's a lot of things that occurred, economy markings, these feelings that are a couple years behind, they're latent, so we're experiencing some things and we will continue to. So I think everyone knows the economy is not exactly where we want it. But there are some companies that I think that are robber baron level of reporting, quarterly profits while knowingly having spun up 500 of these jobs.
Right.
And then these people are on the street, but now you've created the opposite in the market conditions.
Yeah.
Where you have all these people on the street and no one wants to hire them.
Yeah. Well, and you and I have talked about that before. It's like tech companies it's easy to see that. It's easy to see when the economy is booming, tech companies are like, hire, just bloat everything, bloat the company up to the size that, like, you'll literally get to a point where you're like, what do you do? Like, what is your job? Like, I don't understand. And when that person's like, I don't know.
Have you seen the show Silicon Valley?
Yeah, totally.
So, the crew that they put on the roof? So anyone who hasn't seen the show, Silicon Valley, right? So, Silicon Valley is about Silicon Valley, but it's a Mike Judge show. So it's basically the dude's a prophet at this point. I'm convinced he's from the future, right? Like, somehow he knows like these things are going to occur. But there's a whole crew at this startup company that goes in every day, goes to the roof of the building and drinks. And one of these people gets relegated, and they're like, well, we're taking you off this project. And the guy's like, well, what do you mean taking me off the project? Taking off the project. Well, what do you want me to do? Nothing. So I'm fired? No. You're not fired. So am I laid off? Oh, no. We don't do layoffs. And so he wanders to the roof and he finds there's an entire crew of people up there who are still salaried employees that just come in every day and sit on the roof. And look, it's a meme, right? You want that to be completely not true. It's true, right? Right. It's actually happening.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Yeah, and it's funny because in chat, I'm gonna call out chat here, and I'm gonna read this. Rita says, "They are not doing this for money. We're doing it for a crap load of money," and that's what is really interesting to me. So, Happa, you and I could talk about. We could get together, right? We go to a bar.
Yeah.
I'll pay for drinks. Let's say, it's a $50, $100, whatever it is, $200, $300. That's a number that neither one of us is really going to lose our minds over. There is a number at which we lose our minds.
Sure.
Right? Sure. Like, there is a number at which everyone is making decisions very differently than their mama would be proud of.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something I think we're dealing with right now. Zuckerberg at Facebook, the billions he's lost by investing in his, he sees the ad, money going away, and he's lost billions at the same time as the economy taking a downturn. At the same time, he's just like in a downward spiral. But then the numbers that he's playing with would dictate that it would be very difficult to be a good human being and be messing with those numbers.
Well, when you get to a point where you are like Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or any of those guys, do those numbers really affect you? Like, do you really are you even recognizing what's going on? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you'll see, okay, I'm sure these people have the ticker going constantly. They see the economy, whatever's going on, you know what I mean? But are they even worried about this? Like,
Yeah, I'm worth more than Bezos today, but that's just a number.
you know what I mean? Like, because we've talked about that too. Like, Elon, his Tesla stock has crashed with all his Twitter stuff. But he's actually said, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, why would he care?
Yeah.
There is no 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of his money is more money than I will ever see.
Exactly.
Like, it's staggering, right? And there's something to be said for these people that are worth this much money. Any decision they make is going to leave a huge wake.
Yeah.
Just because of the size of enterprise that we're discussing. Right. Like 10,000 people work at these companies, or 50,000 people.
Man.
I worked at a company once that had 35,000 people, right? The decisions that you make that impact everyone in that company create a really large wake. And there's no way it's always going to be positive.
I guess
so maybe,
for me, I don't know. I don't necessarily understand how you could even, because I'm so removed from that thought process too. It's like you can't really understand it. Because I'm still thinking about, little Timmy that might be a software engineer or something like that just lost his job and is now possibly losing his mortgage that he bought when he moved to Austin because everyone's moving here. That's a tech whatever,
Yep.
Like
I think that I'm going to say this. All right, so I'm going to say this. I think the people who are making those decisions should have to sit in the room with every single person they let go.
Look them in the eye.
Look them in the eye.
Yeah.
I will tell you, having done that the number of times I've had to do it. I've had to do layoffs, right? And I sat in the room with every single person. I didn't do a big company, whoa, if your email doesn't work, you no longer work. It's gross. And it insulates the people who are making the decision from the ramifications of the decisions, right? So they get to pretend this is a video game, right?
They aren't people.
I have sat across the table from someone I wanted to let go more than anyone ever. This was not a layoff. This was a fire. And almost been swayed to keep them because of their reaction.
Oof.
Completely knowing that this person.
Yeah.
Hey, they're bad for the business. We've talked to them 9, 10, 11, 49 times about improvement. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
And then them acting like, oh my God, are you serious? Like, my kids are this, or this is just a really bad time. My wife is sick. That's what I got with one. My wife is sick. I'm just like,
but that also, let's be fair. That kind of response is good though, because that means you have a soul. Like, you know what I mean?
That's what I'm driving at. That's what I'm driving at.
Yeah.
Like, you're making, at these big levels, these companies are making soulless decisions.
Yeah, totally.
And I have a problem with that. Like, fundamentally, if it feels soulless to me,
oh, totally,
I will find that company making that decision unattractive. It's not that I'm not a boycott person, right? I don't believe those. We're gonna boycott.
No one cares.
Yeah, no one cares. The publicity from the boycott made them more money,
right?
Than your boycott was going to lose them.
Because let's be honest, all publicity is good publicity.
Yeah, and it was like this boycott of Chick-fil-A at one point, and I was like, man, y'all can say you boycott, but you're gonna get that spicy chicken sandwich. I tell you what, I'll boycott them on Sunday when they're closed. How about that, right? Like, right? And so, like, I understand why people make, companies make political statements or decisions, and people, I don't agree with that, whatever else.
Yeah,
I get that. And people need to choose. You need to speak with your dollars. That's how you need to tell a company you don't approve of them. But at the same time, I find companies that are doing these layoffs and then reporting record profits, I'm noting them, and in my head, I'm thinking,
never.
If I have an alternative to doing business with you, I will take the alternative.
But that's definitely a moral ground, though, that I think that becomes very difficult because of the fact that the way corporate world is. Because I feel like that's becoming a big standard. Like, you go back to The Fifth Element, where old boy finds out he got fired by a telegram. Like,
yep.
Like, that's. Let's be honest. When we get to the point of having By and Large as a company, or like that scene where he's like, we think we need to lay off 5,000 taxi cab drivers, and the CEO's like, lay off 100,000. Like, sir, we only need lay off 100,000. Like, just that evil rolling your hands in the back of a boardroom kind of thought process, right? Like
Mr. Smithers,
yes,
did our
exactly.
nuclear power plant cause all these problems, Mr. Smithers? Yes, Mr. Burns. Excellent. Right?
Excellent. Yes.
Excellent.
But
Yeah,
but that's
it's
scary because it's like I feel like more and more we are getting that way though. And that's why I always talk about. I mean, you always hear me talk about as a leader, you need to be work hard, stay humble, or humility is a big deal, and because in terms of management, leadership at any level, you need to have that humility. You need to have that human contact. Doing horrible things like that over email or whatever is horrible. Like it shouldn't be occurring. Yeah, I don't know.
it's a bizarre world we're living in right now. It's fascinating to watch. I'm glad to be a part of this time, and we're gonna move on to the next subject because this is a good segue.
Sure.
We live in an amazing world where things are changing, and for example, if these companies think the economy is a good driver for them having issues, let's talk about this whole ChatGPT thing.
Evil.
Right. What if, and I'm going to draw a distinction, and I'll get into the technicalities in a minute, between artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? And a lot of these companies that we're talking about depended on machine learning for their profits.
Yep.
These Facebook, the algorithm, right? And you hear them say, oh, the algorithm. They have no idea what it does.
Out of curiosity, is Facebook like the company that created this, by the way? Like,
for
are they
social
like
media.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
they're like the model that others probably built off of.
Yeah, so let's talk about the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? So artificial intelligence, let's get that out of the way first. When you see the movies, you see the science fiction, you see the stuff about artificial intelligence. That's when a machine can make an intelligent decision on its own. We're not there yet, right? AI is not a real thing yet. At some point, everything's still based on heuristics. We may not understand the heuristics, but the machine has said, I have logical arguments to reach a conclusion. That is still a thing.
And they're grabbing data from a database
it's
to
all
correlate
data
that.
points, right? Human beings are still the driver for creativity, right? When you get to creativity, we're gonna have some real weird conversations. But that's artificial intelligence. Machine learning, on the other hand, is taking huge amounts of data, like you were saying, these data points, and changing an outcome. From an engineering standpoint, let me give you an example. Facebook is probably the best early example, but at one point, Facebook, and Rita called this out, Facebook is a place, she remembers the poor decisions. It was birthdays, right?
Yeah.
It was video chat with grandparents. It was, what did I have for lunch today? And the feed on Facebook, if you recall, and Twitter was the same way, was literally, who am I following? Yeah. And in what order did they post something? That was it. That was the entire thing, right? On Twitter, it was literally whoever I was following, and in a chronological order of them posting something.
Sure.
Well, at some point, Facebook, they were the first ones to kind of pull the trigger on this. They said, you know what, we're going to change that. And machine learning is how they did it. And so what they did was they fed the machines a bunch of data, and they said, okay, what should I be showing? What should I be showing Happy Fodder? Well, the question the machine has to know is, what are you trying to achieve?
Right.
Because it's not creative.
Right.
Right. It's not making a decision on its own. So at some point, Facebook said engagement. Well, what's engagement? Well, I want to keep them on the site as long as possible.
Right.
And I want them to click as many things as I can. That's what I want. And so the machine was like, done. And it went on a tirade. It was just still going on, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if you go to Facebook and you look at your feed, if we follow the exact same people on Facebook, we have the exact same social circle on Facebook, right? And you go to Facebook and I go to Facebook, we'll get different feeds.
Yeah.
That's weird, right? You can't regulate it. So Facebook got called in front of Congress, and they're like, how does this work? And Zuckerberg's like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because the machine's doing the machine things. And ChatGPT, right, is an accumulation of machine learning, which is now bordering on, at least perceptively to human beings, AI.
Yes. Yes.
And the reason for that, if people are unfamiliar with ChatGPT, think of it as if a search engine was a person you could open a chat with. And so functionally what it does is you say, I want to learn more about lathes, right? A lathe is a machine where the material spins and it cuts. It's how you make a baseball bat, right? I want to learn more about lathes. Cool. What do you want to know about lathes? A lathe is this. That's what it tells you. Well, it remembers the last questions you asked, so it has a context. So it's like a search engine that creates context. Very fascinating. I've seen some really. I want to give some examples of some stuff I saw, but I want to hear. You're the one that brought this subject up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I want to hear what
There's a reason I'm scared
has
about
seen.
this.
Yeah. I want to hear all of this.
So I read an article where a college professor specifically mentioned his fear of the rise of ChatGPT because of the fact that he knew right now his students in his classes were having it write papers for them.
Sure. Yeah.
100%. So in the article, he specifically asks, like, at what point do we just say all of your work has to be done in class live, like
Sure.
it used to be?
Right. Like I'm watching you do it.
Yes, because he knew for a fact that he was like, I can't prove it, but I know for a fact it's happening because they talk about it. Like, they were out partying at the club or at the bar until 2 a.m, and right before they left, they said, "Hey, man, write this paper on whatever, the rise of fascism in Eastern Europe between this date and this date, and it has to be 600 words." And it pooped it out, and you're good to go. No problem. You don't even need. They didn't even need to read it because it was grammatically correct and spelling was correct.
Yeah.
All that stuff already done.
Yeah.
And so
ChatGPT has changed the game on some of this stuff because of that. What you just said, what it generates is good enough to use and to fool humans.
So my problem with that specifically is, in my opinion, I mean, this is a whole nother subject, but in my opinion, the higher learning is already so convoluted that it's not really learning. Like, it really isn't, you got a lot of crap going on in institutions that are supposed to be for higher learning that just isn't teaching what the basics of what needs to be taught, right? So you're already working from a narrowing, intellectual level, and then you're getting these papers that are, what research papers. So at what point is Dr. blah blah blah, that is gonna be a chemical biologist, but he doesn't know how to do anything in chemical biology because everything was done by this algorithm? Like, at what point does this occur? Like, his credentialing is literally a lie, but you can't prove it because there's no proof. You know what I mean? So this is the thing that worries me. And then at some point, when you get into the arts side of things, musicians, poets, hell, screenwriters, you're going to end up in a position where a screenwriter is going to be just plug into the app what things I need, and it spits out a freaking script.
Absolutely. There was this an experiment that was done, and it's probably still ongoing. I don't remember the name of it, but it was in music, and they were talking about people's preferences for music are so predictable that machine learning can generate music that you would like.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is the music is soulless.
Yeah.
Right. And when you first heard it, you're like, okay, that's obviously generated by something. And it's not that I dislike it, but I can tell it's not whatever.
Sure.
But it's getting better. Right. It's getting better at adding in a flourish or adding in a flaw or trying to convince us that it's a human being. And that is where I think we get into the scary space. Right. There's one thing to be said about artificial intelligence where machines begin to make decisions or be creative or whatever the case may be. There's another thing to be said for machine learning, which is literally just an algorithm fooling us into believing that it's human. That is, and where does that line, where do we cross that line? And that's what professors are dealing with. There's ChatGPT passed the bar recently. You saw that, like in some state, right? Like, and there's people out there now saying, well, I'm going to make a machine learning algorithm that can detect machine learning algorithms. Right. And there's this guy, and he's got this startup, and investors are like, take all my money.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like shoving money.
You gotta get ahead of the game.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, you're right. The big next thing is the machine learning. It's like, I need a helmet that protects my head, but now I need a helmet to protect my helmet. Well, where does it end? Well, I need a helmet to protect the helmet protector, right? And you end up like a helmet.
Yeah,
You know, so where does it end? And ChatGPT is a really interesting, an interesting case, right? Because I think I actually think that ChatGPT is a really good example of us of a good opportunity maybe for us to
sure.
figure out how to handle this. And here's why. ChatGPT, if you go talk to ChatGPT and you ask me, I've done this, right? I'm asking questions, and journalists are doing it, and they're trying to make it mad, they're trying to make it have an identity, and they're trying to do all these things. Its data is from 2021, and it'll tell you that, right? If you're digging in, it'll be like, hey, it's very open. Like 2021 was my last like major data look. So while it's very effective, there's no way for it to get brand new data. We don't have the computing power yet that it can consume yesterday's data, for example.
Right.
And so there are ways to be like, okay, right, we can put time markers in there because from a computing standpoint, we can't get it fast enough.
Sure.
You just can't process the amount of data it needs to process fast enough.
So that would be a good way to keep it safe then, I suppose, right? Is keep its information throttled to however far back.
Well, we
regardless
have a limitation
of the computing power.
Right. We have a limitation where right now we have to do that, right? We don't have there's no way not to do that. If we continue, and this will be, well, I was going to say decades, it'll probably be next month, right? But if we continue down the path, we will get closer and closer and closer and closer to real-time data consumption. And we're so far from that. I mean, 2020, 2 years.
Right.
It's 2 years behind right now, and it's the best tool we have. So it is a good opportunity for us to sit down and say, okay, how should we be handling this? What are the morals of dealing with this? Because it's useful.
Right.
It is incredibly useful. I will tell you, in the software development industry, there are plenty of instances where someone can be like, you know what? I want an app that does these 7 things. And ChatGPT is like, all right, what language you want it in? I want it in React Native. Cool. Boom. Doop. You've actually got the code. Is it perfect? Nope. Is it 85% of the way there? Yep. That's a huge quantum leap forward.
Sure.
That we shouldn't be not having.
Right.
But on the other side of it, you got students who might be doing surgery on my brain at some point, being like, I don't know, man. I was actually face down drunk in the bushes that morning when the ChatGPT took the thing from me. And I'm like, you better come back. You know, it's like,
and at what point are we getting to the point where we're like, I like lattes, like,
yeah,
you know,
idiocracy,
like,
right? Yeah, you're in idiocracy always. Again, Mike Judge comes back into play. Yeah, ChatGPT is one to keep an eye on. Have you played with it at all?
I am legitimately, and it's probably an unreasonable fear, but I'm actually
Are you scared? You're actually scared to go talk to it?
I'm actually scared to do it, yes. Just because, well, and here's the thing to it. I say it's unreasonable to be scared about it because every social media app that you're connected to already knows all the data that you're probably worried that GPT is going to grab. Like, so it doesn't matter. Like, you know what I mean? What I'm worried about is something that is like far more dystopian, like Putin's been dead for the last 10 years and we're literally, you know, we're doing diplomatic conversations with a deep fake and AI. Like that, that to me is scary.
Have you seen Keanu Reeves' take on that?
I haven't.
Yeah, he's, I think it was Keanu Reeves. I'm going to get it wrong because I'm not looking at the article and you sparked it in my head, but I think it was Keanu Reeves. It was like, look, deepfakes are a real problem. And he has in his contracts that they can't do any of the technology to make him look younger, you know, all the tech that's out there today. And that technology is what is being used to create deepfakes, right? Like that's...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he's like, no, that's a real problem.
I mean, if you watch the movie The Irishman, like the de-aging and everything that's involved in that, that movie is insane.
Yep. And you know, you combine that, that's not a bad point. If you combine that and you can teach that deepfake to say things that seem intelligent, you're really close to, again, machine learning faking it, right? You're not quite across the uncanny valley, I don't think.
And let me be clear, I'm not worried about that specific aspect, like, Skynet taking over. I'm talking about somebody that doesn't want other people to know they're running a country. Figurehead is overthrown. They put that deep fake on the TV with AI, whatever, and program in what they want him to do and act and however. And now you've got somebody that you definitely don't want running a country. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that.
Oh yeah.
to me is very scary, because they could do the de-aging, they could do the regular aging. So if you've got a 90-year-old Putin and he's been dead for the last 25 years, like, that to me is pretty freaking scary, I don't know. I suppose for me is I maybe I should have more faith in the human race, but I don't, and I worry about this stuff being used.
No. I mean, I think that you're combining these two subjects, right? Let's talk about this for a minute. Combining these two subjects, what I've already said, and what we already hit on, I'm glad that you made that segue, is that at some level of money, people make soulless decisions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
Human beings make soulless decisions. We're not that far from letting a machine make the decisions to let 10,000 people no longer have a job.
Oh, God. That's so scary to me on a human level, just, Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, right now in the boardroom, I've been in some of these, right? Right now in the boardroom, they sit down with an Excel spreadsheet. And they say, all right, what does the spreadsheet look like? And what's interesting about that, let me tell you what's interesting about that. And this is just my views, right? This whiskey must be good. So let me tell you, you sit down in the boardroom and you're looking at a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet, you're saying, okay, how do I make a decision about the next 6 months, year, 10 years, whatever? And you're only as good at that as that spreadsheet at that point.
Yeah.
So you got to ask the question, who put together the spreadsheet? And what were their motivations? And what did they put in there? And what did they leave out? Because there's three kinds of lies. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics.
Right.
And so when you're talking about statistical analysis, someone chooses to put something in and someone chooses not to put something in. And so these boardroom conversations are all tinted, right, by someone's roll up of, oh, here's the number, 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 here you go, Elon. Right? Like that's how that works. Right. And we're not too far from just feeding those numbers into some machine and saying, well, what should we do? And I'll be honest with you, I'm not gonna lie. Conspiracy theory time, tinfoil hat. I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt that's what Elon Musk is doing all the time.
He has to be. He doesn't. Look, the man is very intelligent, but he's not smart enough to be rolling into a company like Twitter, and he's getting a list of people that they think should be laid off, and he's like looking at their resumes. That's not happening. He doesn't, like you and I said, he doesn't give a shit. It's not a real thing. Like, excuse my language, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
Look at you with your first swear word on the podcast.
I know, I'm sorry.
Do you want me to be? All right, I gotta know. Do I need to edit that out later?
No, it's fine. but like, when you're at that level, you've got that 10,000 foot level. There's no way that you have eyes on all of that. There's no way.
You couldn't if you wanted to. You can give it your dead level best effort, work 22 hours a day and try to do it, and it's just not possible.
Right. Especially when you're trying to affect change as quickly as he's doing.
Yeah, and I don't want anyone here listening to any, the sound of our voices thinking that I believe that's a real thing.
Right.
I don't. Right. I don't believe that's a real thing. I just don't believe. I believe one person being in charge of that much resources has its own impact. Just the nature of that relationship with one person being worth $250 billion.
Being able to buy a major outlet like that, to me, is...
Yeah. And I mean, part of the problem we have, back to the corporations conversation, is those are monopolies.
Yeah.
What is the Twitter alternative?
There is none.
There is none. Right.
There is
and
none.
What's the Facebook alternative? What's the Google alternative? And here's what's happened over the past 15 years, 20 years, as these companies have gotten huge, is they bought their competition.
Yes.
So you couldn't have done that and then sunk them, or just put them on the shelf. You couldn't have done that in the automotive industry. You could not have done that in manufacturing or medicine or any regulated industry.
Sure.
You could not have done that in finance. My gosh, bank mergers.
Yeah.
Right. Kroger is trying to merge with Albertsons in the grocery store world, and the government's like, I don't know. It's like, Google just killed 6,000 companies last year, and the government's like, I don't know about them apples.
You're worried about who's going to have the best butcher in the northeast of the country.
You know what we can't do? Yams. Like that's the line.
I mean, they're pretty insidious.
Yeah, yams. I agree. Thanksgiving comes around, and yams matter.
Just saying.
But like, it's really interesting because tech companies got a pass. Uber got a pass, and
here,
now we've got.
Here's my thing. companies like that. So that's perfect example. Like Uber. How? How?
I
Your
mean, if you want to lose
overhead
half a
for your
billion dollars a
company
year,
is not what? Like what? Like how did that even happen?
they broke all the laws, man.
Yeah.
You know, they broke all the laws. Taxi cab companies couldn't. Right? Taxi cab companies couldn't break the laws. They're very highly regulated in every city. And Uber said, we're a tech company. We're not a cab company. That's actually how it happened. There were a lot of companies that were doing this in the early 2000s. So there were companies that were saying, well, we're not a medical company, so we don't have to abide by HIPAA. What would you say? We're a tech company. What do? We just store medical records.
Excuse me?
Right. We process and store medical records.
Yeah.
But you're not a medical company. Nope. Tech company. And so the U.S. government, and I'm going to get a little bit political here, the U.S. government is full of people who don't understand this stuff.
Yes.
And that lack of understanding has put the government, and I'm not a big government regulatory guy, but look, the EPA is a good thing, right? The Food and Drug Administration, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't want my kids poisoned. you know?
Yeah.
And I have a real fear if there wasn't someone saying, you can't put strychnine in the apple juice. That's just it's bad, guys.
So here's my question though. Like you mentioned EPA or FDA. Having those agencies though, I feel like have driven this. Oh, we're not doing this or we're not doing that.
Oh, sure.
And then
so the
ignorance has allowed that to flourish, right?
Well, the companies were allowed to control the agencies. Right. This is how, a lot of these things happen, right? And you got, where I live, right? Birmingham, Alabama, and Alabama has a history of manufacturing, mining, whatever it is, polluting. Sure. Even though the EPA was supposed to be, the EPA looked the other way, right? There's a lot of collusion, there was a lot of corruption, and so those things happen, right? And to a great degree, tech was allowed to just run rampant. And I have to think a lot of that is still ignorance. Not understanding, when we talk, the whole subject we're talking about is ChatGPT. Yeah. So you and I are sitting here having an intelligent conversation about ChatGPT. You do not work in the tech industry.
Correct.
Yeah. I've spent 29 years working in the tech industry. Right? There is a level of understanding between us that is not shared in the halls of Congress.
Sure.
That this age group is not yet represented in the people who are going to be hearing the case about ChatGPT.
You're right. I mean, and you can even spread that further. Like a perfect example is the idea about taxing content creation income. Yeah,
let's talk about that. Go ahead.
It wasn't until the last couple of years that they've actually had tax code that directly has targeted or mentioned live streaming on Twitch or OnlyFans or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's
you're OnlyFans, right?
Hey man, my feet pay the bills, okay?
Oh. Okay.
No, but in all truth, like this is true, but if you even look at something as simple as like getting a visa to come to this country, like a working visa or something, you can't do that as a live streamer or YouTuber or whatever. Like there's unless you work directly for EA or Blizzard or whatever, and they sponsor you. But at that point, it isn't the live streaming that got you that worker visa. It's the employment visa. You're working for that company.
So let me make sure I get what you're saying, because I like where you're going with this. And this is a good subject, right? So like, I've sponsored lots of people to come, H-1B1 visas, right? And every single time, you're right, every single time it has to go through a traditional employment structure. Right, like there's an existing company, you go work with an attorney, you get in the lottery, you get picked for the lottery, you do all the things you got to do to become a legal immigrant of this country to do a certain piece of work. Sure. And the process is long.
It's ridiculous.
At this point, just take the plaque off from the Statue of Liberty's feet.
Yep.
We don't care. Like we don't want people coming here.
Yeah.
And I do, right? I think like, look, if they, here's the issue. They're not paying, people here are not paying taxes. That's a problem. Well, figure out how to get people here to pay taxes. They want to be here. They want to work. Let them pay taxes.
Yes.
Right? So that's the only, let them contribute to the system. We'd have so much more money in the system.
Yes.
But at the feet of the Statue of Liberty.
Yes.
Is what this entire country was founded on. And we're like, yeah, it's going to be about 9 months at the minimum and about 3 years probably for you to find out whether you can come work here or not. Well,
perfect example. I've been following a she's considered a gaming journalist, Alana Pierce.
Okay, yeah, I know Alana Pierce.
I've been following her for years. She used to work for, I think she works for...
Hey, Alana, I hope you see the podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure she's listening.
Yeah, big fan.
She used to work for IGN. She worked for a bunch of other companies. She's been on worker visas with those companies. Okay, she applied for a green card like a year and a half ago. She's been in this country working for years. And just now got approved. Like... And now, again, not to get political, but I understand the reason why people are coming here illegally, because it literally takes years and thousands of dollars spent to try to get it to do it legally. Like,
if you want to be here,
yes,
you almost have to come here illegally.
Yeah,
it is ridiculous. And so what you were saying earlier is the 1099 situation, right? Which is what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
1099. For people who don't know, 1099 is a form of contract, form of taxation, and that is a form of contract taxation. Meaning, if Happa and I have a business together, we can hire people as an employee, right? Or we can hire people as a contractor. If we hire people as a contractor, that's a 1099 contract. And what that means is that person will take care of their own taxes, that person will take care of their own legalities, and they're not going to hold the company liable for withholding taxes and doing all this stuff that you have to do when you're employing someone.
Which is exactly what Twitch does.
Yeah, exactly. Every content creator who works with Twitch, I don't care if it's YouTube, I don't care if it's any of them, right?
Yeah.
If you are, even if you're like one of the most valued partners, you are still a 1099 partner. They pay you an amount of money. They expect you to deal with the taxes of it. And so what you're saying, I think, is a really interesting point. Those people get no consideration whatsoever under the the current immigration protocols, because the only way they could is to be an employee, in other words, a traditional format employee of an existing company that sponsors, right? Because not all companies do sponsor, right? That's not a real, like, not all, some companies do, some don't. But so you're saying that from a 1099 standpoint, if you're someone who's not employed, you don't have any hope. You have what do you have, like a tourist visa? Is that how you do it? You come over on a tourist visa, you got to get out?
Yeah, but the problem with that is there's also so many rules of, if you're here for X amount of months, now you have to leave the country and you can't come back for X amount of months. Like, just, it's if you don't hire an immigration lawyer to sift through the poo to figure out what you can and can't do.
A poo sifting lawyer?
Literally. I mean, well, no, obviously not literally. Okay.
No, literally. No, I want a poo sifting lawyer now. I think this is, we're on the right track here tonight.
It's just, to me, it's incredibly... I have significantly more understanding of the frustration of the entire ordeal.
Yep.
You know, like, case in point, my mom was a Japanese citizen. She married my dad at the U.S. Embassy in Japan when he was in the Navy. He brought her here. She was here on a visitor visa for, I'm not kidding you, almost 30 years. My brother and I I'm lying. I was 26 or 27, I think, when my mom applied for and got accepted to become naturalized as a U.S. citizen. And she had been in this country for, 20-some years working, everything. And to be clear, it didn't take her that long to get approved. She took that long to make the decision to become an American citizen. Okay.
And it took several years to get approved.
Right. So it actually took her 3.5 years to get approved.
Yeah.
And that was with a sponsor that had a security clearance because he had been in the Navy for 20 years or whatever.
Been serving his country
at the time. Yes.
Serving the country. Yeah.
And that to me is just like, and my mom, all the way up to when she passed away, was a fervent believer that you don't break the law, you don't cross the border illegally, blah blah blah. And she's like, if I could do it right, you could do it right, blah blah blah. But I kind of at this point understand. I don't agree with, but I understand the reasoning.
I mean, look, dude, we've got a marketing problem.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
In the United States of America, we got a marketing problem. We spent a long time telling people to come here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, we spent a lot of years branding ourselves and saying, look, if you want to work hard, you can do anything.
You're cold, you're starved,
Dude, and come to the country and work and be part of our society we're building together.
Yeah.
And at some point, we became incredibly jaded towards that mindset. And I don't identify with the jaded perspective. I really don't.
Correct. Yeah.
I far more identify with being inclusive. Heck yeah, come on. Like, let's get in here and work together. I want to make sure we're all, if you get paid, $38,000 for something, I want to make sure you're paying taxes, just like when I got paid $38,000, I pay taxes on, right? If we're doing that, we're a team. High five. I don't care where you came from. I don't really care what you're doing.
Yeah.
We're in it together. Now, that to me is what we were shooting for an awful lot of years, and what we said for an awful lot of years, and people believed us. And they were like, awesome.
And now everyone's like,
told their kids about it.
Like, why?
Yeah, and
what?
Now people are like, no. What do you mean no?
Like,
build a wall, shoot them at the border. That is what I've heard. So, like, to me, it's like, nah, we got to figure ourselves out here. And if we don't, if we want to be, isolationist and we want to keep people out, we need to be honest about that, right? If we want people to come, we need to be honest about that. And our immigration policies and standards and the way we handle that could definitely use some work.
Sure.
And if you're going to find a good use for machine learning, maybe that's it, right? Let's sift through everyone who's applied. What are you doing? So that's where you're going to have a human being work through everything. If you're going to if you want to apply something like machine learning, apply it to this and let it make some decisions. All these people need a tax ID for the most part. And I want to go all the way back now to what we originally talked about in corporations handling the downturn. And you and I talked about this a long time ago, but I want to bring it up again because we do have time. So you and I talked off podcast, off stream, just you and I. And I'm gonna bring up that conversation because I think it reflects more on me than you, and I think you'll be cool with it. But I was really miffed about what was going on at Twitter with the layoffs,
right?
Because of who was being chosen to be laid off, and who wasn't going were the H-1B1 holders.
Yep.
And you and I talked at that time, and I was like, people don't understand. If you have a visa, let's say you've gone through the process and you've gotten it. So you've made it through all this stuff that we're talking about, right? You've done it and you're in. And now you've got this work visa, this H-1B1, right? It's a high skill work visa. So you've got this work visa and you're here. You cannot do any other job.
Yeah.
That is illegal. Right, you are breaking the terms of what allows you to stay in this country if you go make money any other way than what is outlined in the way that you got that work visa.
Yep.
And so those people do not have job mobility. We like to think as citizens, I'll go find another job if you don't like it, and that's what you hear people say.
Yeah.
And I'm like, got to understand something.
And these people literally have to reapply to be able to do that. In the meantime, they can't stay here.
They have to be They have to be sponsored by someone else.
Yep.
And there are companies taking advantage of this situation. That, to me, when you talk about soulless decision being made, that's the epitome of it right there.
Totally.
That is as bad as you get in my mind.
Well, and I remember you and I, when we talked about it, I said, well, look, maybe, and I was taking a very, I don't want to say callous look at it after doing some reading, but ignorance is bliss. So to me, when I looked at it, it's like, well, as far as I could tell, they were a bloated corporation that probably needed those cutbacks.
Sure. And I'm not going to make any argument that's not the case.
Right. But I will 100% admit that like reading out over some of the blind, like to me, blind layoffs, first of all, shouldn't be a thing. Like that to me is that blows my mind. Like laying somebody off and then a couple days later realizing that you laid somebody off that was integral to the operation of X, Y, and Z, and then going back and saying, sorry, we need to rehire you. At that point, you're like, that person, do they bite their tongue and pride and say, okay, I'm coming back? Or do they just say, F you, I'm gonna go somewhere else. You know what I
I've told
mean?
you,
Like,
I think I've told you this. I've been that guy. Did I ever tell you this?
oh God, that I can't even imagine
I was at a
being
company.
in that position.
Yeah, I was in a company, and everyone around me had quit because my boss was a tyrant. Right. So we were supposed to have, let's call it 8. I don't know what the real number was. Right. It was more than 8, but let's say it was 8. We needed 8 people to do the things that we were supposed to be doing, and my boss was a complete and utter just tyrant. Yeah. And because of that, everyone else had quit, and I cared so much about what the company was doing, and I was trying to get it done. And I was like, I'm going to stay here, and we're going to rebuild, and you know, we'll work around this person that's just like not great to work with, not great to work for. And I came in, and this is no joke, all right? I came in on April the 1st.
Oh my God.
So April Fool's Day, I come in, and it's like 7:30 in the morning, and I'm like, hey, so-and-so needs to talk to you in their office, and HR's in there. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, a bunch of layoffs are going on this morning. So we had no idea this were coming. And someone literally said to me, you're going to be okay. I mean, you're the only person in the department. How could you be?
That doesn't make me feel better.
Right. And I'm like, okay. So I go in the office, and the guy's like, I'm sorry to tell you, we're going to have to let you go. And I look at the HR rep, and I was like, are you serious right now? And she's like, yes, this is a very serious matter. And I'm like, okay. Well, here's the thing. When I walk out this door, I fully expect you to turn around and let him go, because he now has a department of 0.
He's got no reason to be employed.
Yeah. So they didn't do that, right? They did not do that. What I found out later is they had to make the decision in a hurry. And so what they did to decide who was going to be laid off is they took a spreadsheet of every department.
Oh my God. And
they organized people by salary. Well, I was the highest salary in my department. You know why? Because I was the only person in my department. Right?
Well,
and so they were like, yeah. And so they're like, well, he's got to go, obviously, right? And so they let me go. And then, like, I don't know, it was maybe 4 weeks later, 3 weeks, something like that. I get a call from the person above my manager who was like, I think we made a mistake. And I'm like, yeah, do you? Do you really think that might have been the case? Because manager guy's still there. Yeah, he's still here. So you're telling me you think you made a mistake letting me go? Yes, and we really can't keep these systems running, and they're integral to our business. And it's like, good luck.
Why do you sound like Trump when you say that?
Good, do I? Maybe it was him. I was like, good luck, right? But that wasn't me. I was in that situation. Let me tell you what happened. Let me give you the long arc story. I almost went broke, and that went into incredible amounts of debt. It was an incredibly hard time.
Oh,
right?
yeah, I believe it.
And I've worked really hard to try to get beyond it and hope it doesn't happen again. But the dude, the manager guy, invested a bunch of money that he was still making into the parent company, now owns hotels and travels around the world living in the penthouse.
Of course.
That is an American story in a nutshell. And when you're talking about corporations doing layoffs all the way back to what we've been talking about, this is why those decisions matter. You legitimately have made decisions that impact people's lives generationally. Their kids will suffer the impacts of your decisions. And you should take it that seriously when you're making those decisions. And you should have the decency to think about all those things before you hire 600 people you don't need and pay them 3 times what you think they're worth just to meet some number.
But I also think society as a whole, though, we've gotten to a point now where it's okay to not have to do that, not have to have that conversation, not have to, like, it's okay to do the blind layoffs.
Dude, look, I'm not an anti-work guy. I've told you what I do. You know what I do for a living, right? I'm not an anti-work guy, but we are letting far too many executives off the hook.
Oh, yeah. I believe it. I agree.
If you lay off over X percentage of your company, you should walk out with them. That's the way it should go. You know who failed? Management.
Totally.
So why are you still here?
Yeah. My dad, he worked for Quest Communications in Pacific Northwest, and I think we've talked about this too, and he was on the board of directors for Quest Communications running the payphone department.
Oh, yeah?
So you can obviously see the writing on the wall there, right?
Yeah,
so,
payphones weren't the permanent solution, huh?
Right. So at some point, my dad literally had to build severance packages for all of his people, lay them all off, build his own severance package, and literally liquidate his own freaking position.
I think that's the way it ought to go, man. That's
looking
the right way
back,
to do
I have so much more respect for my dad because of that than anybody, because everybody else they'll shift you to a different department or whatever the case may be, right? Like,
dude, such a great call out. There are times, to put a bow on this conversation, there are times where businesses need to lay people off, right? They need to let people go. And GE was a great example. They had all these different things that they were, invested in, and some of those things were going to work, some of those things were not going to work. And if you were in a part of the business that was not going to work, the reality was, we have to, we kind of have to readjust here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the whole business is going to be gone, right? And no one wants that. So it's actually a bigger problem than just like
that's a lose-lose.
But letting the executives off the hook, maybe that's it. And I have not thought about that until today, but letting the executives off the hook. Look, I've told people that work with me a million times. If someone gets a promotion, that's because they succeeded. If someone has to be fired, that's because I failed. Right? Those are management failures are what we're talking about here. Yeah. None of those employees were responsible for Mark Zuckerberg deciding to spend, $1,162 trillion on a hyped up 8-bit, Nintendo Entertainment System headset. That, and I am being a bit hyperbolic there, but at the end of the day,
but you're really not though. I mean, real talk. You're really not at the end of the day.
The executives need to be on the list of people who no longer get paid.
Yes.
If you've got to lay off a certain percentage of your company, the board of directors of that company needs to find a replacement for you. You get 3 weeks severance as well. Goodbye. It's like bankruptcy renegotiations, right?
Yeah.
Look. I can solve these problems. The people that are in Congress now can't solve them. You put me in Congress. You vote me in. I need to be an executive. Let's get the executive.
You're gonna be the greatest congressman ever. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be best.
No, I'd probably be flipping tables and punching mofos in the mouth.
We probably need that.
That'd be about what I could take of those folks.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that either.
I couldn't listen to those people pontificate all day.
Not
knowing anything what they're talking about, pandering. All right. So next subject.
Moving on.
Moving on. I think we've exhausted that one. The next subject is going to be really interesting. I think a lot of fun. And I don't really have a good segue for it. That's why I made the hard break. So there was something, and I put this article, this link, or this subject up here. So I'll talk about it a little bit. There's something that's been going on that I find incredibly fascinating, which is the resurrection of the airship.
Yep.
And when I say airship, what I mean is some people call them blimps, zeppelins, dirigibles. I've heard them called by really old people, right? Like these are airships, right? They're inflatable ships that float and can navigate through the air. And there's this resurgence, right? And there's these two companies in particular. One is called LTA Research. That's a much less interesting name. The other one I think is really fantastic. It's called Flying Whales. And they're building these airships. And the Flying Whales airship can actually carry 60 tons. 60 tons of capacity. And it's really been, I saw it and I was like, I want to talk to Hapa about this. Like, this is really fascinating to me. And I've always been fascinated by airships. But there's all this stuff going on with them because there's this huge debate between hydrogen or helium, right? Hydrogen, look, the Hindenburg was hydrogen. It meets air, it explodes, people die. It's bad. Helium.
Well, do you know why hydrogen was used instead of helium historically?
Historically, maybe not. I know the arguments now, but what does tell me?
It was cheaper. Hydrogen's cheaper.
Yes, that is still true.
It's easier to acquire, easier to compress. It's cheaper. Period.
Yep, and that is still true. So there's this debate now, hydrogen or helium, and I didn't know this, so I learned this from learning about these airships. We're probably going to run out of helium in the next 100 years. So
I love that you picked this topic, by the way. I literally read these articles like a day or two before you added this subject.
So we were reading the same thing?
Yes, yeah.
But what are your thoughts? I mean, I love it. I think I want to buy one and put a restaurant on the bottom of it and cruise around serving people dinner over a city all night. That's what I want to do. I think this sounds like a great idea.
Well, to be clear, hydrogen as a lighter than air substitute for airships is significantly safer today just because of the technology.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Helium, yes, is significantly harder to acquire or manufacture, store, and keep viable because I guess it degrades really quick or whatever.
Okay. All right. So it loses its properties quickly, or is it,
yes,
it leaks? It's hard to keep. Okay. Something about
I don't know
it.
what the proper term is, like the half-life, I guess, is the technical outlook of it. Whatever. Potency. Anyway. I will tell you, so actually, this whole thing, blimps, dirigibles, airships, whatever, as a possible replacement for aircraft has actually been an ongoing conversation for longer than just now. Like, this is, I remember reading articles about this.
Have you and I been following this together and never talking about it? Like, for 20 years?
I remember as a kid, I had a subscription to Air and Space magazine, and I remember reading articles when I was a kid talking about this. Because the lift capacity to fuel consumption is significantly better in an airship than it is. Like a 747-700 cargo carrier can carry, I think, 50 tons or something like that. Whereas, like you said, the airship can carry significantly more.
Sure. And it takes almost nothing to move this.
Almost nothing. Yep.
Yeah.
And they can even set them up to ride the slipstreams and what have you. Like, they don't need to necessarily propel themselves.
I mean,
so.
Chinese weather balloons have proven.
Aha!
We can move these things all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense because also supposedly producing or building or manufacturing an airship is significantly less. It's more cost efficient.
Is it?
Supposedly, than an aircraft.
I find it fascinating. I really do. I think it's cool. And I really do want to put a restaurant on the bottom. So you let me know when you're going to throw $10 in that hat, and we can
Dude, I'm
invest
telling
together.
you, glass bottom airships, I'm down. Let's do this.
How cool would it be to drift over a city? I mean, you pick people up, you do maybe two rounds of dinner a night, pick people up, cruise around the city.
We need to shoot Elon an email about this. Get this happening. A Tesla
Make it
airship.
happen. Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's see if I can get him on the line. And there was something I saw that I'd never really thought too much about, but got me kind of really excited about these things because what you need for anything to succeed, you need a really good business case for it, right? You need some amount of money, right, to be provably spent.
Yep.
That can't. And generally, money is going to follow the path of least resistance, right? So you're going to be like, oh, if I can get it with a helicopter, I'll use a helicopter. So one of the things I saw that was really fascinating about this is because the ones that are being created now are electric,
right?
And so they don't burn any fuel. They could potentially have fuel reserves, right, to recharge batteries.
Sure.
But they don't have to burn fuel. And I never thought about this, but you don't have to have anywhere to land these things.
Nope.
So they can reach areas, geographically speaking, areas that are just further out than helicopters, in places where airplanes just simply can't operate.
Yep.
And we're talking about there's an awful lot of the world. In the United States, we don't have a really good reference point for this because you can drive anywhere. There's nowhere you can't reach in a helicopter here. But there are huge parts of this world that could benefit from having, I need a research station out here, and this is how I get stuff out to it. Or remote villages, or disaster relief, where we can't get cars in and out, right? And helicopters are they're high in demand, right? Because we need them for lifting debris or whatever. It was really fascinating to me when I was reading about it and realizing there's a real potential market for these things, and I would love to see more than just we used to see the blimps all the time at sporting events. And we don't even see that anymore.
Yeah.
And I would love to see, I'd love to see some of this. I think it'd be cool.
This is why the U.S. Navy was using, blimps for decades, from the early 19s all the way up to World War II. Blimps were being used for maritime patrol, for transporting, for rescue, because their linger times, like, they could fly a blimp out over an ocean if you had a shipwreck, and they could linger for a very long time out there without burning fuel, and those are things. The problem you run into, I think, is going back to having a company that produces a aircraft that has potential for profit there, that Boeing or Lockheed Martin or whoever doesn't already provide.
Yeah. Your
sales point has to be, we can do this better, that better, this better, that better, this better, and we do it cheaper. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, I could get an aircraft from Boeing or Lockheed Martin that does the same thing. I don't need to spend money on you.
Yeah, I think that the lift capacity, 60 tons, right? You start talking about that big of a lift capacity.
That's nuts.
You do, it is nuts, right? And you start getting into some pretty interesting conversations when you're saying, okay, 60 tons. Well, what about 100 tons? Right, because it's a matter of scale at that point. I mean, okay, sure, 100 tons. Like with aircraft, that gets really, because you got to lift the thing off the ground. That's the hard. People don't always realize, the hardest part on an aircraft is actually getting it into the air.
Yes.
Right, and to make it lift more, you must have more lift on the wings, and to do that, the whole aircraft has to be bigger, so it becomes a scale issue, and then I can't land. Maybe I can get in the air, but I can't land it anywhere.
Yeah.
Except maybe Antarctica, where it can just go as far as it needs to go. So or Texas, you can do that in probably Texas too, but not in Alabama. We got hills. So it's a really fascinating conversation, and I'm super excited to keep up with it. And I think it's really hilarious that you and I have been following this for independently for some amount of time.
Man,
it's just,
I've always nerded out on weird stuff like that, just random weird stuff like that, like stuff you don't see ever talked about really, but because the image caught me, that big bulbous.
Dude, are they not cool?
Amazing.
If people are listening, or watching, and they have not looked this up, right? There's some good articles out there. But the companies that you want to talk about, and Happy can show it here on the recording on YouTube. But the companies we're talking about are flying whales.
Yeah.
WHALES, like flying whales.
Yeah.
And
which is really
you should look
funny,
them up. It is hilarious. And you should look it up and take a look at these things. This is a really curious and interesting, new potential way of doing things. I do think, as much wind as we have in places that are subtropical like Alabama, I have curiosities about how are you going to keep this thing
hurricanes and storms.
Yeah, like how is this going to work? Can they get high enough to get above the weather, without sliding into some stream they can't recover
well,
from?
I mean, when you talk about balloons, like, not trying to go back to the whole China thing, but like weather balloons go up into the stratosphere. These are Mylar balloons going up into the stratosphere, so surely you can take these things up there to where you need oxygen
above the weather.
to breathe.
That's how airplanes do it, right?
So, interesting tech. I mean, again, one thing I think that's a huge problem with humans, when we latch onto a specific type of tech, it's very hard for us to veer, right? Like, we are latched onto the atypical aircraft, wings, propulsion, fuselage, layout.
Sure.
So trying to get the idea of bringing back dirigibles, like, I promise you, most people, the image of the Zeppelin, exploding.
I was sitting in a room, and I'm gonna own it, right? And this has been probably 2010, 11, maybe around that space. And I was sitting in a room, and I was talking to some guy who owned a company, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to make his company more money. And he was like, we went through we had these really smart people who were going through, here's how you're going to market the company, here's how you're going to do this stuff. Right. The guy you see the old guy, right? He looks across the table and he goes, dirigibles. And I confess, I looked across the table and I was like, what did he just say? Excuse me. Did you just say dirigibles? Yeah,
that word hasn't been spoken in 40 years.
Airships. And I was like, I don't know how we get those. And that's where it kind of stops. It's like, I understand what you're saying, but even if we said that was a good idea, it's not. But if we said it was a good idea, I don't have an acquisition path. I can't go get you a dirigible, sir.
Right.
But maybe that changes in the future, right?
Maybe.
That conversation. Maybe
Indiana
maybe we
Jones
can have a restaurant.
in the
You're gonna
dinner
cook at the
car
restaurant.
of the Zeppelin, asking for tickets and throwing people out the window when they don't have them.
Well, that's what Rita said. It cuts down on Dine and Dash. If you have a restaurant on the bottom of a dirigible.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's Dine and Dash is a whole different ballgame. The movie Up, right? The guy had a dirigible, and he had the whole museum in there, and the whole basically that guy was cruising around the world living in one.
And if you think about it, like you talked about, legitimately, okay, you got these balloons that are possibly traveling above the clouds, so you literally lay solar panels across the tops of them, and they're electrically powered.
Yep.
So they keep a small fuel reserve just in case to run a diesel generator, when they need it.
Yeah. I like this one. We're gonna keep talking about this one. I'm gonna
start buying stock immediately, my friend.
I'm gonna keep an eye on this one. I like this one. I'm not gonna lie. I like it. It's an emotional buy for me, but I'm gonna buy it. I like it.
It's an emotional buy.
It's an emotional buy. I'll own it. It's an emotional buy. I get it. The thing, look, if it works, it's gonna work big.
Oh, totally.
If it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. But if it works, it's gonna work.
It's only stupid if it doesn't work.
It's only stupid if it fails. All right, Happen. We got about half an hour left. We got a couple things we want to run through. So, one of the segments I'm gonna force us to always have because I love it, and I think over time this segment will get longer, right? And it'll take up more time each time. So I'm excited to do this time. But Happen, what you watching?
So this is gonna be a little bit different because I was super excited when you said you're gonna watch it, because last podcast, when we did What You Watching Happen, I'm going to need you to go ahead and come up with a jingle, by the way. I need to hear, like, what you watching happen? Something. Anyway, when you asked that question, I said, somebody feed Phil.
Yeah.
Like that. Look, man, there's no question to the fact that, I loved Anthony Bourdain with a passion. I met the man a couple times. Like, he really blew me away as a man's man, or I like to say a human's human. Like, he loved that connection between people. And anybody that is in the film or video or documentary realm that has that thought process is an instant win for me. And that's been missing until I discovered Somebody Feed Phil. And the first few episodes, I always tell everyone, the first few episodes are a little bit hard to get through because Philip Rosenthal is literally trying to figure out what he wanted his show to be. You can literally see it. If you watch from episode 1, it morphs slowly into what it is today. And
it's on season, what season now? It's like 7.
So they just renewed 7.
Okay,
so I think that's not going
to
to come out till next year. I think sometime. I think they're filming it right now. But
okay,
this is how big of an impression that show left on me specifically is I remember episodes and seasons for the areas, and you living in Alabama and along the Mississippi Delta area. That's why I immediately told you, go watch season 4, episode 4, the Mississippi Delta, because that is right up your alley, literally. And I want to hear what you think. No, you're fine.
Okay,
I want to hear what you think.
So I did watch the episode, right, and we talked about this. The Mississippi Delta, right, is a special place in my heart for a lot of reasons, of course. But what was interesting is I sat down and I watched this show, right, and I'm watching Philip Rosenthal, and I get exactly where you're coming from by saying, hey, Anthony Bourdain, there was a gap left in that.
Yeah.
But I don't want people who are maybe considering watching the show, and I do recommend people go watch it because it's just good. It's just good. But I don't want people to think they're walking into an Anthony Bourdain world, right? Anthony Bourdain was a very serious human being. Anthony Bourdain was very intense, but very, very kind of steely focused in a very empathetic way human being. Philip Rosenthal is not that guy. He is having fun, and it's the same. I think what they share, though, is this deep empathy towards other human beings where they just want to go make a human connection, and food is how they do it.
Right.
And so what struck me about watching this, I got a lot to talk about. This one episode, a lot to unpack. Okay, I asked you this.
But before you go on, though,
Yeah.
it's summed up in one quote, and I put that on our notes because Anthony Bourdain had a thought process and an underlying thought process with all of his episodes, and it really goes back to this. The quote that I put in there is the perfect meal or the best meals occur in a context that frequently has very little to do with food itself.
Say it again.
And the perfect meal or the best meals occur in a context that frequently has very little to do with food itself. And that's where I connect Anthony Bourdain and Phil Rosenthal specifically.
Yeah. And so what Anthony Bourdain was talking about there is, we're having a meal, but we're making a human connection, and a meal happens to be part of it.
Yes.
Yeah. You're right. I think that's a good call. Philip Rosenthal seems to be, with this show, making those sort of connections. And, he takes some stuff and he goes a little bit off the beaten path, which is an Anthony Bourdain did that, right? And, he goes off the beaten path and he meets people who are doing interesting things with food, sure, but they're just interesting people. And one of the things I asked you about is, are all the episodes this beautifully shot?
Yes.
I'm not a cinema nerd, right? I've known enough of them, but when I recognize that the photography is gorgeous, I'm talking about, the food shots. Yeah. Okay. Yes. The food shots. I expect that. But shooting the towns, shooting the places, shooting the people, retaining their humanity, doing those sorts of things is a really high level art form. And
I don't why think it's everyone, so good?
Why?
He shows what everybody there, wherever they are, sees every day. That's it. They don't spruce it up. They don't try to make it special. Yeah. They literally show what whoever it lives there on a day-to-day basis would just see on a day-to-day basis, and that makes it so real to me.
It's really beautifully shot, and you feel the place, right? And so this particular, it's also really well sound edited, by the way. I was very impressed with that. And the reason I say I'm impressed with that is it's hard, right? I would encourage anyone who doesn't understand, take your phone, take a microphone, take a camera, go try to shoot something of really high quality. And you'll discover pretty quick how hard it is to shoot something of really high quality. Yeah. And when you've got a crew that can go on the road from Memphis, Tennessee, down the highway through Mississippi and make shots like they are making on the move, unbelievable what they're doing. And so he starts in Memphis, right? And this is what, the Delta, people talk about, the Mississippi Delta. And I think a lot of people think of that, being all the way down in South Mississippi. And sure, that's absolutely part of it.
Yeah.
If you want to see abject poverty, that's a great place to go. If you want to see how society has systemically left some people behind, that's a great place to go. But if you go north from the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, you go north, you take Gulfport, you go north, right? All the way to Memphis, you're going to find your way up through some really interesting towns. And the thing about Mississippi that's super interesting, I met you. We were talking about the USS Kidd. We came down to Baton Rouge, right?
Yeah.
We drive through Mississippi on those travels. Mississippi doesn't have a major city. Like nowhere in the state, is there what anyone would consider a major city. And you can go to all these towns and you can meet all these people. And to a person, every time I've done that, they have been amazing.
Yeah.
And this captures that, right? He starts up in Memphis. He grabs some food in Memphis. He meets some people. Memphis. He goes to Beale Street because you have to go to Beale Street. It's where the blues were born. Of course, I'm passionate about that. But then he drives south, right? And he starts hitting these places when he gets through Mississippi. Better. And it's like, he's actually capturing what people, I think, miss sometimes. And this is what spoke to me. So I don't know if you knew this when you sent this. You said, hey, this is one you have to see. But one of the things I always ask people, I'm a big cheerleader for my region. And you hear Southern hospitality, right? And that you hear people throw that around. And people I don't think, realize that it's a real thing.
Yeah.
People look you in the eye. They welcome you. They like you because you're there. Right? They give you, it's a different thing than if you're in some other places, right? Yeah. And that, that show captured that humanity moment. There was this scene where he was sitting there and he was talking to the owner of a restaurant, right? And her great-grandson was at a table a couple tables over, right? And the great-grandson's like 12 years old. And he's like, hey, you want to come over here and eat with me? And the whole interaction was very genuine, was very authentic. The cameras could have been there or not been there. He didn't seem to care. And there's something special about people who can make a show where they're authentic, they're legitimate, right? He's talking to his dad on Zoom or Skype or whatever.
That's the best part about that show.
It's
is
great.
That his mom, dad, wife, brother, his brother's the producer of the show.
Oh, like, is that true? I didn't know that.
Yes, his brother's actually the producer of the show. Like, the thing that kills me about that show and why it's so good is that Phil will have whoever he's with, right, at the restaurant or whatever, but he will literally someone will be eyeballing the filming going on, and if you take another look at that episode, you'll see it. People in the background eyeballing what's going on, and he'll catch that and say, "Hey, come over here. You want some food? You want some free food? Like, come here, and he'll just meet people. Like that to me is amazing. Like you're not so wrapped up in what you're doing that you're in a bubble and you're ignoring what's going on around you. You know what I mean? Like that to me is
it's
amazing.
Pretty beautiful. And I'm gonna watch a lot more of it. I appreciate you turning me on to it. You and I have talked a lot about this, and we're gonna talk a lot about it in the future, and we'll continue to talk about it. I long for a world where people want to connect with each other because they are people, not because I expect something out of you, right? Not because I need something from you, not because I expect something to come of it, but because you're a human, and that in and of itself is enough for me to want to know you.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what I got from watching this show, Somebody Feed Phil, right? And the whole concept is really cute, right? Like, he's going to go to a town for the love, somebody give this guy some food, right? That's kind of the premise is, like, I'm going to be in this town. I hope somebody feeds me, right? That's kind of how it works
great.
out. So
it's great.
It's not the restaurants. It's not always the restaurants you might think.
Yeah.
It's not these big-name restaurants. It's like...
Yeah.
There's a house where a guy cooks.
He does that. He goes to a couple Michelin-starred restaurants or whatever, but for the most part, he's going to, like in that episode with the Mississippi Delta, like it was literally somebody's house that was built 100 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
it was a guy's grandmother's house or something, right?
like
this is my granny's house.
Yeah.
Or the granny lived across the street. He bought the house across the street from his grandmother, started a restaurant
to make it a restaurant.
Oh, dude, that episode. They're having breakfast. And they're having fried lobster tails for breakfast.
Oh,
fried lobster.
God.
Okay, look, everything about that was like, what the
Let
what?
me
the
tell
what,
you
the what.
how many want to go markers I've put on my Google map watching his show. Not even joking.
If you come see me, that's between us.
Oh, my friend, you and I need to have a conversation because we need to have a freaking holiday roll. Let's go, man. Let's go. Like, I am
what
down.
I should do is I should take the train to New Orleans. You should meet me in New Orleans.
Let's go.
We should drive north and then come east, come back home. It'll be fun.
Let's go.
It'll be a lot of fun.
You tell me when. I'm on a plane or I'm driving. Let's go.
All right. Well, you're gonna come to this town. I'm gonna feed you.
Well, I'm a big guy, so I enjoy getting fed.
Yeah. Like, we can.
Legitimately, Somebody Feed Phil. There's also episodes in that show where I'm not gonna lie, they may tear you up a little bit, because he goes into like Syria, or he goes into wherever, Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
He goes into, and he's not eating at restaurants. He's eating at people's houses.
Yeah, someone's house. Yeah.
And the thing that I love about that is the human aspect of it. Like, you're seeing somebody in a culture that shouldn't mesh with a Jew, because he very, very, very regularly mentions how he's Jewish.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he still eats pork. He doesn't go the full kosher, you know, but he's in a house of an Arab, having an Arab meal as a Jew. You know,
what if we were all just people trying to make our way, right?
Yes. And that literally speaks to my heart of the whole be a better human, that thought process of, you know, be a better human. I always tell people that I love and my friends, like, you know, my front door is always open. I've got a place you can sleep. There's food in the fridge. I got alcohol you could drink. I'm here, man. And I wish more people were that way. And it may be a kind of an ignorant way to live life nowadays, but, dang it, if more people did that, it'd just be a better place. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So,
I agree. People could be better. Yeah, I mean, you know how I think about that, right?
Yeah, man.
Like we've talked about that. It's the world could be a better place if everyone was a better person, right?
Exactly. And that's a perfect example. And like, I fell in love with that show not because of seeing all these extravagant places. It was literally the interaction between two humans. That was watching his interactions in Rio. Like, you're gonna see Brazil, which is during Carnival, which is very much
that's
not
fun.
something that type of person. He's married and he's older and it's not really his environment, but he had fun.
What are you saying? What are you saying that Carnival's? I'm not sure.
Well, it's
my
friend. If you and I were 20 years both younger, we might have gone and had fun. Nowadays, we probably need to take a nap halfway before we get there.
yeah. I hear it's the party.
It's a bit of a party.
I think it was a great recommendation. I'm looking forward to seeing more of it again. It's Netflix. Somebody to fill. Anyone interested in checking it out, you should. Highly recommended. Hapa recommended it to me on the last podcast. I now will recommend it along with Hapa. I will tell you, if there's a show you recommend to me that I don't like, I will tell you, it wasn't for me. Right? I won't ever be critical of art. You won't find me being hypercritical of art as a musician. I've I had someone come up to me on a set break and say, "I hate your music," and
Jesus,
like you might. I think people who don't create, right? People who have never done that, especially public art, don't realize how hard it is to put yourself out there, and then how hard it can be when people are very critical of it, right? And so the truth of the matter is, if someone's making art, I'm going to say, hey, I see what you're doing, love it. Not my thing, but it is. I respect what you're doing. I think it's awesome, right? And there's always a way to approach that. And so I will tell you, if there's a show that's not great, this one's great. I think, if you're a fan of seeing places that are beautifully shot, these places probably have never been memorialized in photography, right? A lot of them. And it's just, it is legitimately gorgeously shot, right? That's notable. The sound is unbelievable. You don't miss out on words. You don't miss out on the intonations of people's voices. It doesn't get overly, loud. I've seen in Getting Coffee in Cars with Comedians, right? That's a really good example of a really good show, but the audio on that is not as detailed as it could be, and so they do a really good job with some of these things. And
he does a lot of things that you can tell are his too. Like, throughout an episode, he meets with, say, 5 people throughout whatever town he's in, but at the end of every single episode, he always has dinner with everyone that he met. Like, everybody from that visit, he brings all of them together.
That is a thing he does. So I didn't notice that. So that is a thing he does.
Every episode he does that. And every episode, I'll be honest with you, his parents at the start of that episode are in their upper 80s, early 90s. They both pass away during the seasons. And I know that's kind of I'll be honest with you, I found this show right after my mom passed away, and that was I immediately noticed when his mother was no longer there. Like, he doesn't talk about it. I immediately noticed because of the fact that she is very present through the first few seasons. And I'll tell you, that really stung watching the progression. But at the same time, the love that he shared back, if he's thousands of miles away from his mom and dad, and he's sharing that love, like, that to me is something I wish that I had thought about ahead. Because Zoom, I mean, come on, man. Zoom and Skype, think about that, how amazing that is nowadays, right?
I know. And, it was back to what Rita was saying earlier about in chat. Rita was talking about Facebook and and we do talk about a lot, and I think we talk a lot about the negatives of social media and things like that, and we don't always hit on the positives, right? But there is a truth of the matter is we shouldn't take for granted just how many positives have come out of it. Being able to stay in touch with family over remote distances, being able to see people that you wouldn't get to see all the time. Those are really the superpowers of our generation. You and I are, I think, we're not too far from the same age, right? But near the same.
He's older, by the way.
I am. But we kind of gave the world the social media thing. Right now, the generation behind us is going to have to figure out how to handle
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
those kinds of things, seeing your family, seeing your those are really powerful things that the world has. Now.
That's
I
the
mean, my
only
gosh,
reason I
you're
had
in
a
Austin,
Facebook.
Texas. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, and we're doing a podcast together for crying out loud.
That would have never happened, honestly, if it wasn't for the internet.
No, it's great. And these tools that people create because they want to make a thing, right? And
Yeah.
here we are,
Yeah.
benefiting from it. So
I honestly only had a Facebook because I was in the military, and it was the best way for me to keep that line of communication going. What was going on when I was gone, and seeing what they had going on when I was gone. So
now, when you were in the military and you were away, were you able to kind of keep up pretty well? Did you feel like you were?
There were
obviously
times
you're missing out. You're not there. You're missing out.
Correct.
Sure, but you are far more in touch, right, than you would have been.
I will tell you, I joined the military at a weird time, because when I joined the military, my first ship I checked on board, they were just getting email on board. So I was in that generation transitioning from getting mail once a month when you're out at sea to being able to send an email and get an email back. And around that time was when they also started inventing email to text. So I was able to email to text somebody and get instantaneous conversation.
So you were emailing and it was hitting their phone or whatever. And
right. And so I'll tell you, just being able to log on to Facebook and see pictures from home, or when I was married, seeing pictures of what was going on day to day with my wife and kids, and like telling them, hey, I love this, or commenting on stuff. It's still, you're still obviously thousands of miles away, but you had that connection still.
Yep.
That I couldn't imagine having, like my dad or prior generations, where they literally would write a letter, put it in the postage on the ship, and it literally wouldn't leave the ship for 2 or 3 weeks, and then would take 2 or 3 weeks to get home, and then a month or more to get back. Like, that to me is just nuts. Like, the idea of that. And so I will tell you that that's definitely a positive about social media, because I used to take the night watch. I would volunteer all the time for the night watch, which was like 11:30 at night till 5:30 in the morning. I volunteered for that because when I was on the other side of the planet, that's when my family was awake. So I could sit on a computer while I was monitoring a radar screen or whatever, and I'd be having text conversations, across the world, across the globe. So I mean,
we shouldn't take for granted the level of connectivity. I mean, there's certainly we have dangers and things we need to talk about, but we shouldn't take for granted how it actually has made a lot of really positive.
And you watch movies like The Lone Survivor or 13 Hours, talking about the Benghazi stuff, or talking about, Chris Kyle, and any movie where it talks about, soldiers that are deployed forward somewhere, they literally are having email conversations with their family. I'm not going to lie, all those scenes, more so than people passing away or whatever, they choke me up, because that's that when you're over wherever connects you to reality. You know what I mean? When you're in a world that's really not connected to reality, like none of it is real for you when you're there. So, that's huge. That human connection is a big deal. And that goes back to our conversation we talked about. So,
and the whole reason we're doing this.
Yeah, exactly. But I know I definitely digressed a lot on the whole what am I watching? But
what have you watched? Would have been the right
what have I watched? What have we watched? I definitely know we're running a bit over on time, but I still...
Nah, we got 8 minutes. We're good.
Well, what are you listening to, my friend?
Yeah, so thanks for asking. Like, as anyone who doesn't know me, I'll tell a little bit here. I am a new music guy, right? So from a music discovery standpoint, I love new music. And every Friday I put out a playlist, which is brand new albums. It's albums, if people don't know, in the music industry, albums come out on Friday. Generally studio albums I try to listen to and check out new stuff. And I'm an album guy, right? And I used to talk about this a lot when I would stream, but I don't talk about it anymore. There's a reason I'm an album guy. Having made albums and having done some of that work, I know how hard it is for an artist to put an album together.
Right.
Writing a song is a thing. Sure, you wrote a song, and how many one-hit wonders do you know of? And
Right.
one or two songs, right? An album is a whole different ballgame. And when you sit down and make an album, 12 songs, let's call it, you're gonna work your way through, how do I order that album? What are the right songs to keep on it? I may write 25 songs, only keep 12, right? And all that work that goes into an album. When you take an album and you put it over to the side, and an album, by the way, is what we call an LP, right? It's 10 to 12 songs, basically 70 or so minutes of music that one artist puts out. That is that artist in that moment. And you can go back in time and you can look at things like Dark Side of the Moon, in my opinion, one of the greatest albums ever, Pet Sounds, right? You can talk about the Beatles' White Album. You go about these albums, and not only are they a great representation of the artist, right, but they're a great representation of where society was and technology was and everything else in the moment, right? So having said all that, that is my disclaimer for what are you listening to. Willie Nelson.
89 years old.
89 years old, Willie Nelson. National treasure. Older than some of our national parks. Willie Nelson put out a new studio album, not a new live album, right? Because the guy is still touring and there are still live albums to be made. He put out a new studio album on Friday. And the name of the album, get this, the name of the album is I Don't Know a Thing About Love. 89-year-old Willie Nelson put out an album that said, I don't know a thing about love. And it is fantastic. If you like troubadour music, which is basically what country music wishes it was still.
Sure.
Guy with a guitar with a hole in it, writing a song from the heart. That's Willie Nelson. And how Happa is this 89-year-old dude who has smoked weed on the roof of the White House with presidents
every day,
still able to write an album from the heart. We may live our entire society may fizzle out and never have
here's my question.
A greater
do you think
artist.
He's this good because he's 89 years old. He's lived
I
life.
I actually was saying in chat that he's actually 90 now. So
oh, is he 90?
Has he actually hit his 90th?
Oh my God. I mean, you're talking about a guy that has. Let's just think about the perspective of 90 years.
Dude.
How much you've seen, how much you've dealt with, how much you're talking
about 1933, Happa. 1933.
And he's been producing music for like 70 years or something. Like, there's more than that, I'm sure, but oh my God.
Yeah, no, the guy, and here's the thing, when we do this on podcast, I want to tell everyone that if I recommend an album, it's because it's a great album.
Sure.
Flat out.
Yeah.
It's a great album from a musicianship standpoint. It's a great album from a songwriting standpoint. I'm not going to just recommend. I listen to a lot of music. I'm not going to just recommend something. If you want to check out something and you want to hear something amazing, go listen to Willie Nelson's new album, I Don't Know a Thing About Love. Came out yesterday, right? Came out yesterday. And I'll be honest, I feel like a little bit of a jerk. When I was sitting down looking at, I have a lot of different places I go to find out what music came out. I had no idea Willie Nelson was about to release a studio album, and it caught me completely off guard, so I was surprised by it.
Nobody's going to anticipate that a 90-year-old...
I just wasn't thinking, there were some other bands and acts, and I was like, okay, I know that's coming out, and I've got some of these on my radar. Whatever reason, Willie Nelson wasn't on my radar, and I saw it, and I was like,
I will add it to my list, man.
And I listened to it, and I was like, it's just good. It's just good. It's what I wish country music was still doing, if I'm not gonna lie.
I Don't Know a Thing About Love.
I Don't Know a Thing About Love.
Add that to my list.
Let me know what you think about it. I'd love to know.
Yeah. We jokingly talked about this before we went live. Like, I wish and hope that I will have like a fraction of my mental and physical faculties that this man has at 90 years old, smoking up all of everything he can get his hands on, like still producing music. Like that to me, oh my God.
There's a highway between California and Texas, and you may know of this highway, and I forget the number, but it's famous for cops busting tour buses.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right? So
yeah.
Tour buses that are traveling from California to Texas, they always take this highway. And the police department in this small town along this highway, as soon as you get into Texas, is notorious for pulling over tour buses
Yeah.
and busting people for drugs. And Willie Nelson got busted, and they took him to the court. And the judge said, if you'll play for me, I'll let you off. And Willie Nelson's like, give me my
Okay.
guitar.
Yeah.
And that's Willie Nelson. And when I say, smoked pot on the roof of the White House with presidents, that's an actual thing. And it's not one president. Right? So, like, it's multiple. That's the guy we're talking about. And here he is making music. And I do have some I want to send you. There's a guy I've played music with in the past released an album, and he's from the Mississippi Delta. So I'll send you. Mem Mods is the thing. You're gonna have to like, but I'll send you.
Yeah.
A link to this one. Let you check that out since we were talking.
Let
about
me
the Delta
tell
stuff.
you, I have never connected more with. I don't know if it's a mentality is the right word. The thought process or people in general than I have with folks from not just the South, but that portion of the South in general.
Deep South. Yeah, Deep South.
Deep South.
Yep.
The type of people that they'll come out to greet you when you step onto their property, but they may have a shotgun in their hands. And they'll still be friendly,
Yep.
That type of thought process, and because I grew up in the country, but I lived in the city for most of my life, and I still prefer the country over the city any day. But just that thought process and the twang, the music, and the lifestyle, like everything to me is, spot on. Like one of the things my mom had joked with me about before she passed away was like she was remembering when I was sitting next to her in her deathbed was when I was young. I had a pair of overalls and I wore the piss out of those overalls, and I was barefooted, no shirt on, overalls, running it all over the neighborhood as a little kid. And that's the look that you have when you think about these neighborhoods out there as well. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know that look. I'm from the Deep South. I grew up in the Deep South. I will remain in the Deep South, and I've stayed here on purpose. Had a lot of opportunities to leave, and chose not to. And there is some soul, right? There's some soul to it. Not everyone appreciates that. Not everyone wants that. But if it gets you, it gets you, right? And
100%.
So. Yeah. All right, man. Well, look, we're at time. We're a minute or so over, so I think on a high five you across the country. And
yeah, man.
Nice job. We did a good job on keeping on time. This has been fantastic. We covered, from a subject standpoint, we covered everything we wanted to cover. We went through the economy and how corporations are handling it, how ChatGPT, AI, machine learning, how all those things are impacting the world around us. Our airships, our future. Then we found out a little bit about what we've been watching, right? Which again, I'll plug it in there, which is Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix. Go check it out. And then, what are we listening to, right? It's going to be Willie Nelson, and it's, I Don't Know a Thing About Love. So you can catch that on Spotify. Or my favorite, which is Tidal, right? The artists get paid more if you use Tidal. But you have to pay more if you use Tidal, so I get why people won't do it. But at least go check out Willie Nelson's album, and I'd love to hear, post some comments, what people think about it. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. And as always, guys, like we always talk about, like, if you have subjects you think we should talk about seriously, we joke around on the podcast, obviously, but the subjects we talk about, we try to focus around, what's going on in our heads, which is kind of a crazy idea to begin with. But, but if you have a subject that you're curious about, or you have questions about, or something that's piqued your interest, definitely put it in the comments. And like I said, I read every single one of those. I make notes of them. S3VYN and I talk about it. I would love to hear what you guys have to say, and plus it does help the algorithm if you like, subscribe, and or make comments. I know.
Feed the machine.
I'm sorry. That's the plug. That's the plug that you always hear
on our behalf.
Help the algorithm. Hit the like. Hit the subscribe. Make the comment.
Feed
blah
the
blah
algorithm.
blah blah. Share it. All that stuff. But I will always and have always closed out any stream or live anything with take care of yourselves, take care of each other, laugh, smile, make someone else laugh and smile. And I've recently added, near and dear to my heart, a statement that a young man made at an awards ceremony of call your mom. Call your mom, call your dad. If you have a parent alive today, call them, tell them that you appreciate them, have that conversation. Let them tell you about their day, because you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. So, but yeah, that's all I'll say about that. But any last comments from you, sir?
I mean, I always end everything with the same, similar, right? If there's someone in your life that you haven't heard from in a while, family or otherwise, be that person who reaches out. Be that kind of person who
100%.
texts somebody and says, hey, I was just thinking about you, right? You would probably, if you've never been the person that made a big difference to, I'm happy for you. But there are people out there who just getting a text message may change the course of their entire life, believe it or not. It will absolutely change the course of their day. So be that person that reaches out. Someone hits your head, right? Maybe that's the universe yelling at you. You need to reach out to your old friend that you haven't heard from in a while. Just say, hey, say what's up. And it makes a big difference to people. And just connect, but be authentic in your connections. There's enough hate in the world. Spread some love instead.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully we'll be back in a couple weeks, not a month. We're working on it. It's a work in progress, folks.
We're getting there.
Love the hell out of all of you, and we will see you next time.